Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. In this video, I'd like to talk about what's going to happen when Parliament eventually gets control again. Now, by the time you watch this, it may be the Supreme Court has announced their decision. I don't know what it is at the point at which I'm doing this. It doesn't really matter at what point Parliament gets back in. There is a list of things they are going to have to do to, quite frankly, prevent this mess ever happening again. Top of the list, of course, is going to be prorogation, but there are a number of other things that I think Parliament can do fairly quickly and certainly should do in the medium time as well to prevent the disaster of not only the last few weeks, but the last few years as well. But first, if you find yourself enjoying the video, then please click the like button and subscribe to the channel. So when I say prorogation, that's the suspension of Parliament arbitrarily by the Prime Minister, regardless of whether or not he can do it under the circumstances he has. That depends on the Supreme Court judgment. He can certainly do it for political gain. We probably need to remove that. In fact, I would suggest that Parliament needs to remove all prerogative powers from the Prime Minister. Prerogative powers are executive powers that the government has, which the Queen exercises, but on the advice of the Prime Minister. The problem we've had recently is not really, well, most of us haven't really known what discretion the Queen has, turns out none at all, in which case what's the point of her having these powers if even in ridiculous circumstances she can't go, are you sure about that? So the Queen is head of state, not the executive, so her role is international diplomacy. She's not the Prime Minister's gopher. So I would simply say that Parliament should remove any devices that could be used by the Prime Minister to frustrate the will of Parliament. Just remove it from executive hands altogether. So when the Prime Minister wants to suspend Parliament to begin a new session, fair enough, Parliament will go, all right then, yeah, we could do with a new session. They will determine the timing of it, the duration of it, and if needs be, the purpose for it. That means that the Prime Minister can't use it for some other purpose as well, but that third one is probably less important as long as Parliament has control over when it happens and for how long it happens. After all, it's supposed to be just for a Queen's speech. A Queen's speech takes a week to prepare. That's it. But they should also remove anything else that the Prime Minister could otherwise do to go against Parliament, which is known as the sovereign power in this country. The Supreme Court has verified that a few years ago. We know that. We knew it before anyway. The other thing is that before the general election, there's going to need to be something done about electoral fraud. It's very difficult at the moment to say we can ever have a free and fair elections. There's some action needed. Some of it's going to be quite tricky to do quickly. But there is one quick thing we could do even before November. And the biggest way to get a big win is to simply make all social media political advertising illegal. We all know about the Cambridge Analytica Facebook scandal. The whole area isn't policed. The problem with that is you only then find out about the criminality after the event, by which time the electoral vandalism has already taken place, the damage is done. So what they need to do is to say, right, we need someone to police this. We don't have anyone at the moment. We don't have any effective way of picking up the criminality as and when it happens and stamping it out. So we just remove it completely. If anyone advertises on these platforms, then they are by definition breaking the law for political purposes, if that is advertising. And then it's simple. It's simply done. Sort it out later at some point in the future. Speaking of which, how about investigating what it was Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings have been ordering Whitehall to do with everyone's personal data, or specifically with targeted personal data? It's strongly believed that they're using government resources to target key people around the country with their tawdry Facebook ads to try and get them to vote for them, in other words, for party political purposes. This is terribly illegal if this is what's happening. So there definitely needs to be an investigation in that post haste, as soon as Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings are removed from Number 10 and Whitehall respectively. Ensure that proper investigations also take place into the people responsible for the illegal behaviour during the Brexit campaign, which has not really got anywhere. That has to also include finding out, for definite, without doubt, where the £8 million that banks donated to Leave.eu came from. And there are also other things I think that should be looked at, but maybe can't be done too quickly. Maybe this is more of a medium-term thing. So proportional representation, of course, in Westminster is long overdue. quite a lot of the difficulty we've had is we have this attitude in Britain that one party or the other, in modern times, Labour or the Conservatives, will form a majority government. The rest of the opposition, they'll just form select committees and generally moan, but not a lot is going to get done against the government. Occasionally the government will slip up and they'll lose a vote. So, I mean, proportional representation would do two things. First of all, it would mean that you've got a closer match between the vote share in the country and the distribution of parties in Westminster. And the other thing it would do is it doesn't actually favour majority governments all the time. So it also encourages parties to work together. Now, as a supporter of one of the parties that does sometimes get into power, you'd be thinking, well, why are you in favour of that? Well, we don't get into power very often in Labour. That's the problem. So this would at least remove the Conservatives from power quite a lot of the time, in fact. So that would have a benefit both ways. And we can see how it works in other European countries as well. And I think it should be a very strong proportional representation system, much stronger than, for example, in the Scottish Parliament, which is better, but there's still quite a lot of first-past-the-post voting. Now, I mean, I suppose actually after a general election, if the Lib Dems did quite well, and in other words, they became kingmakers again, even if they didn't want to form a coalition, they could return to this like they did in 2010, perhaps not making such an arse of it this time. I would like to think that they'd also get support from Labour on this. I cannot for the life of me work out why the last Labour government didn't do this, because yeah, I understand that you don't want to change a system that's put you in power, but Labour knew they weren't going to be in power forever, and they knew that when they weren't, the Conservatives do have a habit of staying in power for quite a while. The second thing is probably a different system for the Speaker of the House. The issue at the moment is the Speaker of the House, who of course is elected by MPs, and then as long as MPs are happy with them, when a general election comes around, the major parties do not field a candidate against the Speaker because Parliament approves of them, which means that the parties should not go against the will of Parliament and oppose them in an election. However, the Conservatives have run roughshod over that convention. Labour to a lesser extent threatened to as well if Harriet Harman went, but I have to say that's not the national leadership, that's just the local party there. Now, what I would say at this point is, if we have a system that's based on conventions, first of all, have we not been bitten on the arse enough by this? But second of all, if those conventions are actually being threatened, well, we can't have a system based on those conventions. We need proper rules laying down. And that means looking again at the system of Speaker of the House, really. And the other thing as well is, I would say Whitehall, and this can be done fairly quickly, needs to be instructed to provide full and accurate data to the Office for National Statistics. The ONS has constantly complained at the Conservative government, from David Cameron, Theresa May. I haven't heard them complain at Boris Johnson yet, but he's hardly been about to do any complaining about, for basically misrepresenting statistics and even not furnishing them with the full statistics, which has allowed them to claim record low unemployment, for example, which is clearly not true. The ONS knows this isn't true, and levels of poverty as well. In fact, on unemployment and poverty, the Tories basically deny it even exists. So yes, they need to be instructing Whitehall not to massage the figures. You go to the ONS, they're the ones who carry out the analysis on the figures, give them the raw data. Simple as that. Anything else I would suggest? There's quite a list of things I would like Parliament to do, but I'm going to suggest that anything else is unlikely to get a united approach from the various different current opposition parties, but perhaps these ones could gain some traction were the opposition parties to set aside their differences and replace Boris Johnson with a government of national unity, or perhaps in the event of a general election, if they're able to form, if not an official coalition, then some functioning working group after the general election as well. So those are my thoughts anyway. Have you got any of your own? Put them in the comments below. Enjoy reading those. Hope you found the video interesting. If you'd like to support the channel further, then please click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.